Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to the wonderful world of Poddywood, the podcast where we talk about movies with the people who make movies. I am one of your co-hosts, Steve Hester, and with me, as always, is
I'm Andrew Roger Carson. I
hello,
could have
Andrew.
led into that with an amazing spiel or comment or anything, but I'm still in awe that Chippendale Rescue Rangers was a lot better than I expected it to be. I absolutely love this movie. Oh my god! Released on Disney Plus yesterday, or when you hear this show, probably about a week ago.
Yeah,
Um, it's the new Roger Rabbit for our generation, and the humor is incredible. But it's I remember, I think there was one section of Poddywood After Dark when we were talking. Remember that? Poddywood After
yes,
Dark, where I think I mentioned that, oh my God, they're doing a Chippendale Rescue Rangers movie, and how much is that going to suck? And I could not have been more wrong. So props up to After Dark, or also as it's known, Before Sunrise. And let's have a chat about our What's in the Box from last week, Steve.
are you done?
I am. Gonna
You're
take a
done.
breath.
Okay.
Pass
Yes,
the Chardonnay, dear.
yes. Oh, yes. You're on the wine today, aren't you?
I
Yes.
am. I am.
Yes, I'm going to save the wine until after we finish recording. But yes, Richard Linklater, Before Sunrise, 1995, the first in his would you say Sun trilogy, the Before trilogy? I don't know. What would you call it?
Um. Well, I guess it's the Before trilogy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, let's call it the Before trilogy.
Yeah.
Starring Uma Thurman's baby daddy Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy as Jesse and Celine, a young American man and a young Parisian girl who meet on the train going to Vienna, where Jesse is about to fly out after visiting Europe back to the US, and Celine is just basically just passing through on the way home to Paris. The two of them strike up a conversation on the train, and just as they get to Vienna, Jesse decides, in a grand romantic gesture, to ask Celine to get off the train with him and then spend the rest of the day and the evening through until the morning walking around the city, as he doesn't want to get a hotel room. And as he's flying out in the morning, it'd just be a chance to spend some time with someone who he'd just met. Romantic feelings abound, and the story follows the two of them as they go through the city. Now, you mentioned the other week that seeing as how I liked once, I'm probably going to like this.
Yep.
I have mixed feelings about this one.
Ooh.
Ooh, indeed, yes. Firstly, let's get the good out the way. The good is there's some really nice, mostly naturalistic performances going on. The dialogue is properly fluid, and the way that it's performed, it feels very naturalistic at times, even though it does also come across as very heavily scripted, but we'll get onto that in just a short while. There's some really, really nice moments between the two leads as this romance blossoms. Particularly, there's one scene which takes place in the listening booth of a record store,
Yes.
where they just keep giving each other very, very furtive glances and kind of looking away as the other one looks at them, and you can obviously tell that there's this burgeoning kind of fire that's kind of building up between the two of them, which ultimately gets reconciled. I think it's either the next scene or the scene after, in the Ferris wheel, and then that kind of stays with them throughout the rest of the movie. It shows off Vienna in this wonderful light, and it really does look like an absolutely gorgeous city. Funnily enough, though, considering that this is supposed to take place overnight, there seems to be more stuff going on in Vienna than it would be in the middle of New York. For some reason, there's like bands, and there's bars are open all night, and there's ferries where you can sit and have a coffee at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it just seems to be so much going on that you're thinking,
Yes.
wait, why aren't we all going out to Vienna? Never mind Amsterdam.
Yeah, it
It's
is a
just
very postcard movie in
it
that
is.
respect. Yeah.
It is. There's a lot of it which does come across sometimes as very much like a tourist film. Come to Vienna and you can see all this kind of stuff. And it looks very nice. I think the lighting at times is a bit flat. though. There's not really much in the way of nice plays of light. Everything just seems to be kind of very kind of just a bit flat and a bit plain, which I guess is keeping with the low budget the feel of the film. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more play around with that. In terms of it's not all good though, because I do have a few issues with it. Firstly, it's got that kind of mid 90s urge to just have verbal diarrhea. And I think that was something that was kind of kicked off with gusto when Tarantino came out, and everything was all about these long kind of rambling monologues or duologues between people where they talk about the life, the universe, and everything. And pretty much every single scene in this movie is discussing some kind of element about love and romance and relationships, which works for a lot of the time. But there are some times where you just think, yeah, come on, this is like the fifth scene that we've had in a row of you two going into a bar and discussing, where you think relationships should go in the future. I think we've already covered this. And the fact that the film actually has a 1 hour and 40-minute runtime, it does feel a lot of the times like it's dragging on with this sometimes rather pretentious take on where we should be in terms of our relationships with other people. And it does feel like it needed an editor to just kind of sift through it all. And if you do compare it to Once, and it's a little unfair because the two are very, very different movies. But if you compare it to Once, you have this hook, this kind of central hook, which is the music, and then the romance is kind of built around the shared love of the music. In this, it seems like the hook is the conversations between the two, which does work, but ultimately that is all there seems to be. And you kind of are there thinking, no, could we not just have a little more? I know this isn't like an adventure film. It's not a Michael Bay movie. You're not going to have car chases and explosions, but at the same time, there does get to a point where you just get tired of just them having a duologue for the 18th time, and you just want something else to come in and break it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I'll give you that. I mean, it is. I guess you can say it's an autobiographical kind of account of Richard Linklater and Kim Kreis, and separately, they both had similar stories, such as this, where they had this encounter with, a person on public transport, and then ended up spending, 24 hours in a location with them, which is where the stories kind of come along. And most of the on-screen dialogue was the work of Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, uncredited. Of course, there was a big story about that at the
yeah,
time, which they got credited on the sequels to. I mean, Richard Linklater, when you kind of say that this is part of the trilogy, it's actually not a trilogy. There are four parts to this,
really.
because Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy reprise their roles in Richard Linklater's Waking Life, his kind of cell shaded animated movie. There is one segment of that where they are together playing those two characters. So realistically, they have appeared in another movie as well. So it's kind of, there's four tales to find. Richard Linklater, people either love him or don't love him. Right, his movies are always have a kind of independent feel.
Mm,
Stuff like Boyhood, which he shot over the case of, what was it, 12 years,
something like that.
15,
Yeah.
something like that. And then you've got obviously A Scanner Darkly, which is love it or hate it for some people. And then you've got the Before trilogy, which is set over the course of this couple's relationship moving on. And you'll obviously see the other two sections of it, which is Before Sunset and Before Midnight.
Mm.
And I'm sure we're not finished seeing Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy's characters yet. I know that in another possibly 5 years we may see another one. Who knows?
Yeah,
And,
called
and I would
Before
like to.
Menopause.
Before Menopause, yes.
Yeah,
But
Before Brunch. That's the next one.
yeah, I mean, for me, I like there's some very nice little things in there. It was so nice to see the Ferris wheel make an appearance.
Mm.
So if you know of the Third Man, or even if you know of the exactly that one,
Yep.
or for you 80s kids, it was in The Living Daylights with Timothy Dalton and Olivia Diablo on that Ferris wheel also. So that makes a nice appearance in the movie.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy Julie Delpy a lot more than Gwyneth Paltrow and Jennifer Aniston, who were also up for this role.
Oh, I did as well. I've got nothing really against the performances. I just thought that everything needed to just be trimmed down. You
Yeah,
know, just stop being so self-indulgent with it all. Kind of like, no, I got where you were going like about 20 minutes ago. There are scenes where there's like a fortune teller, and then they go to a bar, and then they're having discussions there, and then they go to another bar, and then they're walking down the street having a discussion, and then they're walking into another bar and having a discussion. And it just gets to a point where you just think, right, we get it. We know that we're heading to the point where you two have to separate. And you're obviously going to be having ruminations about that as well. But so, can we kind of skip over some of this? Because we don't need to know how you went to a cemetery and it made you think about the people who were buried there. Okay, we get it. That's a rumination on life, and it's showing about how the differences between you, and he's life loving and you're scared to death all the time. But yeah, we got that back on the train within the first 10 minutes. So can we
yeah.
kind of leave that to one side? That was my issue with it all.
Did your missus enjoy
No.
it? Okay. Well, I guess, do you feel it deserves to be in the box? Or are you on the 50-50, this is a bit overrated?
I think I'm on the 50-50. I didn't hate it. I mean, we've pulled some stuff out which I have actually just hated, but no, I didn't hate it. I just didn't like it. You know?
Oh, and at some point, you've got to go through these people again.
I know.
But hopefully it'll take a more distinct turn in the future. But enough of the future. Let's talk about the past. Let's get some anniversaries on the go.
We watch them again all of the time, or we get them on Prime for free. But we only know how old they are when we learn their anniversary.
Yeehaw.
Well, 4 this week. Seems to be
4.
the going trend, you know.
Yeah.
But there were 4 noticeable ones. So let's start at the big 35. It is no secret, after we were speaking about Ishtar last week, we mentioned that this movie kicked the shit out of it after its first week of release. Beverly Hills Cop 2 was released. Go, John Ashton!
Whoop woo.
And,
That's the sound of a policeman.
Yes, and thank you for your shares, John Ashton. Always supporting us.
Yeah.
And we look forward to getting you back on. Beverly Hills Cop 2, bigger, faster, deeper, deeper, deeper undercover. Directed by Tony Scott.
Yes, with more orange.
More orange and blue. The Simpson Buckheimer look, as I used to call it. Tony Scott obviously doing a fantastic job on Top Gun. By the way, Top Gun Maverick released at the end of this month. 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Are you getting commission on it and I've not been told? You trying to shield Top Gun Maverick? Yeah, watch Top Gun Maverick.
No.
Do you like my new wristwatch?
Yes. I feel the need with it.
Yeah.
Tony Scott, you may know him as the director of Top Gun, but also he had directed So Fair, such as Domino, which wasn't his finest hour. The Fan, which I believe was a kind of underrated movie, and true classics like True Romance, and actually I'll throw Unstoppable in there, which was the Denzel Washington runaway train movie, which is actually pretty good.
Did he do Bad Boys?
No, it's Michael Bay.
Oh, was that Michael Bay? Oh.
Yeah, the other guy that adopted the Simpson Bruckheimer look.
Oh, totally.
Yes. So, Beverly Hills Cop 2, obviously, it was the Juggernaut. This was also the movie which was Chris Rock's first movie role.
Yeah, he's a valet or something, isn't he?
Yes, the valet at the Playboy Mansion.
Yes.
And this was also the first ever movie shot at the Playboy Mansion. No movie had ever done it before Beverly Hills Cop 2. Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, they used to party like crazy. This was also the first ever movie that I noticed the late Gilbert Gottfried, who appeared as Sidney Bernstein, the accountant or lawyer, whichever he was.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
improvising his way into infamy with his great delivery. Ouch! Let go of my arm. And sadly, we just lost him just recently.
Yeah, we did.
I was connected with him on Facebook, and it was sad news. And he was someone I was hoping to get onto the show, and it just didn't happen. As mentioned, sorry Ishtar, but Beverly Hills Cop 2 was the juggernaut that was the biggest opening weekend of 1987. It was huge. It was everywhere. And it was unoriginal because the whole plan of the alphabet crimes was an actual play on the ABC murders by Agatha Christie.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, look, culture, novels,
Poirot.
books,
Yes.
reading, yes. I did ask the question on this. When looking at all three Beverly Hills Cop movies, does Axel Foley only ever go to Beverly Hills when someone he knows has been shot?
I think so. Although technically he went to Wally World. I don't know if Wally World is actually in Beverly Hills. But,
copyright. It's not Wally World, but it's Wally World was National Lampoon's Vacation.
Oh god, yeah, of course it was. What was the one in this one? Uncle Paul's Land or something. I don't know. It was a crap film. That's all I know.
Yeah, it was bad.
The only thing I remember about Beverly Hills Cop 3 is that George Lucas was in it. That was it.
Oh god, yeah, at the bar with Mick Garris, host of Postmortem with Mick Garris, podcast that is great if you love your horror movies. I also kind of, when I was watching this movie again this week, and I've seen it God knows how many times, but I watched it as a reminder. It's interesting that Judge Reinhold's character, and we mentioned in the John Ashton episodes the shift in that character, but on his bedroom wall he has a Cobra poster.
Oh, is that
you know where we're going with this, right?
You know, is that an homage? Where is that?
Look at this, okay? Sylvester Stallone was the original choice for Axel Foley, and he wanted to turn the script into what became Cobra. So he went off and did Cobra, while Beverly Hills Cop was this huge movie. Add to the fact that at the time, Sylvester Stallone was going out with Bridget Nielsen, who is in Beverly Hills Cop 2. And also at the time of Beverly Hills Cop 2, Tony Scott was having an affair with Bridget Nielsen. So that's kind of a nice dynamic to have there. He's like, hey, fucking Cobra, let's put this poster on the wall. Hey, Sly, your missus is getting the Cobra from Tony Scott.
Yeah.
Right. Standouts for the movie. It has that infamous Harold Faltermeyer score that it is right up there with the score of Vangelis, who we sadly also lost this week, which I wanted to just throw a quick nod in there. But everyone knows the Axel F theme. And of course, this was Eddie Murphy on fire. You know, this was when he was, I think this was the turning point. This must be when he was the biggest, highest paid actor in Hollywood at the time.
Oh yeah, his stock was just, I don't honestly think it was as high ever again. This was, I think, his absolute peak.
Yeah.
Really. And he had a few other big movies, but this was, I think, by far the biggest one. I think it was all downhill after this in one way or another.
This was Eddie owning Hollywood. This would be interesting if this was around the time when Richard Mirisch was introduced to him at that party, because he'd obviously signed this deal with Paramount at the time, of which Beverly Hills Cop 2 was one of them.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, go back and check out the Richard Mirisch episode. It's a cracker.
It is a cracker. Worst thing about this film that I realised again this week, a song I wish I would never hear again, and unfortunately watching this movie I did. I Want Your Sex by George Michael.
I don't actually remember that one.
You don't remember that song?
No, I don't remember that
it was
song.
Everywhere in the 80s when that came out. And it was like, ooh, the song's a bit risque at the time, and it's really not nowadays. But yeah, it's not a great song, and definitely not a great inclusion to have in this kind of strip bar place. It's in Beverly Hills Cop 2. But yes, Beverly Hills Cop 2. Not as good as the original. Miles better than Beverly Hills Cop 3. And a great moment for our pal John Ashton. So Beverly Hills Cop 2 is 35 this week.
Okay, what have we got next?
Well, one of the greatest comic pairings ever.
Badil and Skinner.
No. Oh, God. Better than that. Better than that. 25 years ago this week, Beavis and Butthead Do America was released.
Oh, yes!
You've got to love this. I love this movie. I'm not even going to lie. I'm still in stitches at some of this movie. Created by
Mike Judge. Yeah.
Mike Judge, who you know from Office Space, a little series called Beavis and Butthead, which was
King of the Hill.
And of course, King of the Hill.
I went to see this in the cinema.
I went to see this at the cinema as well. And I couldn't get anyone to go with me, but I think I eventually managed to get a girl to come with me, and she loved it as well. Sad thing about this is Paramount executives at the time, they actually envisioned this as a live-action movie with Beavis and Butthead being played by David Spade and Chris Farley.
Oh, God. They just wanted to just squeeze those two into anything, didn't they?
Yeah, well, they obviously had Tommy Boy the year before, and they went and did the movie called Black Sheep, which was basically Tommy Boy done again with two different characters. It was the exact same movie and didn't fare as well, and I think that was kind of the end of the partnership for them too. What is interesting about this movie is, in history, this is the only animated movie that MTV has ever done.
Really? What about stuff like Aeon Flux?
That's not an animated movie. That's a live action movie.
You know, I knew that they did the Charlize Theron one, but I could have sworn at the back of my mind they did like an Aeon Flux film, an animated film.
No, they did an animated series.
Right.
That I think they pieced together all of the episodes to make a movie. You know that thing they used to do on DVD and stuff, and claim it's a movie. Like how many movies has Walker Texas Ranger actually done? No, it's just 2 episodes stuck together on a VHS.
Transformers: Arrival from Cybertron. You know that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, it's a movie, damn it. Thundercats Ho the movie. Are you sure that's not like 5 episodes just pinned together?
5 Ho.
5 Ho. There you go. Notable things about this movie. This was the record holder for a December weekend box office until Scream 2 knocked it off.
Oh.
So this actually did break a record for a short amount of time until the Wes Craven horror juggernaut pretty much kicked it off. And and the good thing is, mentioning Chippendale Rescue Rangers, there is a nice little Beavis and Butthead bit in there, which hopefully you'll notice when you do watch it. This was mooted for a sequel so many times, and it never happened, but you'll be happy to know that Paramount Plus is greenlighting that sequel, finally.
Nice. I wonder if they're going to still be young, or if they're going to end up like middle-aged. I hope they're still going to be young, even though Mike Judge's voice isn't as pliable as it once was.
I don't know. I'd love to see them do the Bill and Ted Face the Music route, where they are actually just older losers. But yeah, Beavis and Butthead, 25 years ago this week, Beavis and Butthead Do America. Brilliant movie, catch it up. It is hilarious still.
Yeah, absolutely cracking. So, what do we got for numero 3?
Number 2? Oh,
that's number 3.
I know. Okay, in 1993, this week, Cliffhanger was released.
Oh, cracking film.
It is. When Ray Harlin gets it wrong, he does stuff like Driven, Cutthroat Island, and The Legend of Hercules. As we mentioned, was it last week?
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were talking about Driven. When he gets it right, we have Cliffhanger.
It's a proper old school action film.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. You know, there's the grizzled guy coming to terms with stuff. There's the mustache twirling supervillain, you know, in kind of like the Hans Gruber mode, with John Lithgow just chewing the scenery of that movie so much. It's wonderful.
This was the decade when any kind of diehard clone needed someone to do an English accent to be the villain.
Yeah.
Right. And John Lithgow's accent, I'm 100% convinced watching it this week that this is where Tom Hardy got the idea for Bane's voice. It's from John Lithgow. Get off. I haven't got on it yet. You listen to it. You listen to John Lithgow's accent in Cliffhanger as Quaylen, and you will hear Tom Hardy's Bane.
Actually, on a side note, before you carry on, where did they come up with the names for these characters? Was it just kind of like a random kind of Scrabble board that they just shook up the bag and then just pulled out letters at a time?
I think that's probably the way to do it.
That guy's name is Quaylen. Okay, that's a triple word score. There you go.
Yeah. Well, this movie also is a current Guinness record holder.
For stunt work?
Yeah, very good. It
Hey.
has the costliest aerial stunts ever performed on movie. And that goes to Simon Crane, who got $1 million to cross from one plane to another plane on that wire while it was actually in the air.
Yes. Yes,
How
I
to make a
remember
million in 60 seconds.
that. To be perfectly honest, I think most people need to get paid that amount of money to do that kind of stunt. Like, Goody was already wearing brown trousers.
True. Well, they actually had to shoot that one scene in the United States, which is one of the only scenes where that was filmed in the United States, because the stunt was actually illegal to do in Europe, where they were actually filming the rest of it.
Right.
But Simon Crane made $1 million to do it, and he didn't even make it. He did not make it to the door. You will notice that there is a snidey cut there when he actually does reach the door because he didn't make it.
Right. Okay.
But Stallone chose to do this movie to conquer his fear of heights, apparently, and also to have his first hit of the 1990s, because before this he had done Rocky V, Stop or My Mum Will Shoot, and Oscar. It was not a good start to the 90s.
No, and then he
Sylvester
ruined it all
Stallone.
with Judge Dredd as well, didn't he?
Ooh, ooh. He did some stuff in there that was actually alright, because he did Demolition Man at the same year as this, so we can forgive him. This is another movie where a sequel has been constantly... A sequel was actually written called The Dam, as in D-A-M, not The Dam. It never came to fruition. I think Daylight is probably the closest that you could class as a cliffhanger sequel. In fact, you could actually believe that it is the same Stallone character
Yeah, he could do.
in both Cliffhanger and Daylight and get away with it. And there's major logic gaps in the movie. The biggest logic gap is the fact... I love it. The fact that the Denver Mint actually only create coins, not dollar bills. So that robbery is kind of ludicrous.
Oh yeah, but you've got to have these. You got to have these lapses of logic. You've got to have this willing suspension of disbelief. Because if you didn't, you'd never have any films at all.
But I would so be in line of them, like hunting for all of these like loose coins, like they're Mario, jumping around all of these hills. That would have been an absolutely brilliant version.
Yeah.
We mentioned John Lithgow and his terrible English accent. But Christopher Walken was originally considered, and I think he was originally cast before he turned out, which would have been even better. But also, strangely, David Bowie and Brian Ferry.
Okay, Bowie I can understand because he's had a fairly reasonable acting career. You know, Labyrinth, Man Who Fell to Earth, blah blah blah. Brian
Zoolander
Ferry?
playing David Bowie.
Yeah.
Brian Ferry, yeah.
I want my money. Tell me where's the money, otherwise I'm going to shoot the girl.
Now I want to see that. We missed out.
Yeah.
I think they just selected who are the people with the really distinct kind of odd voices. But okay, the standouts for this movie, I'm going to say, it is all about the whole production side, putting this movie together, the stunt work. All of it, everything is fantastic. As I say, the worst, it has to be Lithgow's accent, but I will also lay blame here. The one thing that really does not gel falls on Janine Turner.
No, the
who
romantic.
plays yeah, and it's not her fault, but her character is not really given anything to work with, I don't think. And she is just the woman in peril by the end of it. But she really does not throw herself into the movie, and she's not really been a big name ever since. I think this is the biggest movie she's ever done in that kind of, the main female lead. But when you look at Caroline Goddard, who plays the woman on Quaylen's crew, and she is just fabulous. What a treasure she is to the British acting scene. Just really knows how to deliver with what she's got. And she's like a secondary character, but, in a movie that has Craig Fairbrass in it.
I know that was like his first Hollywood film, but he comes off with so London. Yeah.
Oh, it's a good striker.
Right.
But no, he does what he does. For a character who's such a company, but his name is Delmar.
Yeah. I was in London's Burning.
Yeah. Sean Bean was not available at the time. Colin Craig. Okay, so yes, 1993 Cliffhanger was released this week.
No, we're getting some good 90s stuff. So what else have we got next?
We're going to go back to the 80s. We're going to go actually back to 1983.
Ooh.
I wanted to throw this one in there. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I thought I've got to talk about this week. I don't know how much I can talk about it if you've not seen it. So, in 1983, an anime movie called The Professional Golgo 13 was released.
I've never even heard of this, let alone seen it.
Oh my god. This was directed by Osamu Dezaki, the late Osamu Dezaki. He directed, it was anime, is what he did. So stuff like Tomorrow's Joe 2, Haiku Guy, Legend of Moby Dick, and more famously Space Adventure Cobra, which I'm sure even you would know about.
Nope.
No, okay. Well, this was actually very different in the anime sense that the action in it was very inspired by movies of the West. And the strange thing happening is that many films of the West after this film was released used this as inspiration. So it's a movie about, he's a hitman, okay. It's Goku is his name, but it's Golgo 13 to everyone else. That's his call sign, like 007 type. And it's very well done in the James Bond mold, but much more violent. So he beds a woman probably every 10 to 15 minutes. He shoots countless amounts of people. He drives a Ford Thunderbird in one scene, which is utterly ridiculous. But this movie was among the first ever movies animated to use an early version of CGI.
Okay.
Another movie called Lensman was the other one around this time that really incorporated very early CGI. It's very noticeable. They do this Apache helicopter attack on this building, and all of the helicopters are CGI. And I've got to admit, it looks really fake now, but back in the day, it was absolutely amazing. Now, I love The Professional Golgo 13. It's not one of the greatest movies ever, but it is one of those movies that you could swear if they did a live-action version of it, you'd be like, Chow Yun-fat would do that role. I think Chow Yun-fat would do any role, to be honest. Spring roll, sausage roll, anything.
You
any
love
role
him, don't you?
I love Chow. I really love Chow Yun-fat. But The Professional Golgo 13, I class as one of the godfathers of what anime is today. So you look at movies from the 80s like Akira or Fist of the North Star. Golgo 13 is in that pantheon of movies from that era.
Right.
And it's a movie I know you would just love. It has everything you love about a Hollywood action movie, but done as an anime, following a very Americanized kind of narrative, not your typical Japanese narrative of an action movie would be, which is either full of exposition or, they'll stop and, discuss something halfway through a sword fight.
Yeah, and there'll be that shot where they'll like come together with swords, and then the camera will pan very, very slowly across the hero's face while it has an interior monologue.
But it follows the end bit where he's got to enter this building to take out the main bad guy, right? But it's done very Game of Death style, where you've got all of these various villains that he's got to fight, these different hitmen and everything. And it's just so cool. It is such a cool little movie that does not get probably the love that it deserves. But I wanted to give it a shout out this week. If you haven't seen it, you have got to track The Professional Golgo 13 down. In 1983, it was released this week into theaters in Japan. So we eventually got it through the manga video label in like 1992, 93, I think.
Yeah, that'd be round about when it was really ramping up in this country.
Oh, yeah, I saw everything. I saw everything that got released. But yeah, it is worthy of an inclusion, and you should check it out.
Ah, okay. Right. So that was 4 really, really good suggestions. 3 of which I've seen, which is pretty good going.
That's a record.
Yeah.
That is a record. Call Guinness.
Yes, I'll have one.
We have another record. Put a flag in this week. We're done. Speaking of done, we are coming up to the last segment with our interview with Cy, Voris, and Ethan Reiff. And it has been an amazing 2 weeks previously. And now we're getting into, what is he talking about today? Are we finally getting to the Robin Hood stuff?
Yes.
Beautiful. And we've got a very interesting Nominate 5 coming up.
Yes, haven't we just?
And stick around for after the show to hear how hard that Nominate 5 was to compile together. Well, let's bring our guests in for the last part of the interview.
Well, like you say, I mean, Supercell, it had the 2 seasons. We're kind of planning for a third. And if so, where would the series have focused on moving forward?
Yeah, we actually had our early, Cy and I, just the two of us, had held our own in-house early discussions about what the third season would have been, and there was a decent to good expectation of us getting a third season because the second season had received pretty much equal or greater critical acclaim from the first. I don't know, on the commercial side, I think it was probably equal. You know, we didn't get a bigger audience or bigger sales for Showtime, but we didn't drop either. So we had a decent expectation of being renewed for a third season. And then we kind of fell victim again to that regime change thing. To pause on the creative content if there had been a third season, which we can discuss also, which I don't think we've ever discussed before anywhere, so that might be interesting. But what happened was Showtime got bought. Actually, it was the year before Showtime, the second season, the year of our second season, Showtime had been bought by CBS Viacom, and they hadn't really gotten into the weeds with our show or any of the shows on Showtime. They sort of left Showtime to its own devices, with the sole exception of cracking down on episodic budgets. And that hit us on our second season, which was a serious challenge because the second season of Sleeper Cell, unlike the first, which almost entirely takes place in Los Angeles, the second season takes place half in Los Angeles and half around the world in the Balkans and the Middle East, and much more ambitious physical production situation. And so we had like tighter budgetary constraints while we had to sort of, you know, spend more money, right? Or have to find a way to squeeze more production value out of the same or lesser dollars, which, thanks to us and our very hardworking and talented collaborators and crew people and line producers, we were able to do and pull off pretty well. But then the second year that CBS Viacom was in charge and our show was on the chopping block, it just didn't. They were gonna get more involved in the dollars and cents and maybe even the creative content notes, development notes, and the people in charge at Showtime just made their decision that I remember we got that phone call, Cy and I got that phone call where the president of Showtime delivered the bad news, you know, that we weren't coming back for a third season. And I think he was a little bit bummed about it because it wasn't his favorite show. It wasn't a show in his own personal taste he would have gone out of his way to watch, but he respected it and he admired the quality with which we had been able to deliver it, you know, episode after episode. And I think he was a little bummed that he had to give us that you're canceled news, you know, but he did it. He delivered it in a diplomatic, you know, sad way.
I would say something somewhat radical in that I would say two things. I'm actually, maybe Ethan feels this way or not. I don't know if we've talked about it explicitly. I was and am actually relieved that we didn't get a third season of Sleeper Cell for two reasons. One, we ended the second season. We ended the series in a way that was really bold and very daring, that I don't think if we knew that was the final episode of the show, we would have ever done that episode. In a weird way, we ended the show a little bit on a cliffhanger, but thematically in a really interesting way, thinking we would probably come back and do a third season. And in a way now, I look back at that final episode of the series, and I'm thinking, wow, that's great. And we probably wouldn't have done that if we knew it was the last episode of the series. I think a lot of shows that know they're going to end, they get very self-conscious and they try to tie up all these loose ends and do this, that, and the other. And we didn't have any of that because I think honestly, when we made the final episode of season 2, we pretty much thought there would be a third season. So we just sort of did a very pure, creative sort of ending for the season, which ultimately I think was a great ending for the show. The other thing is it was exhausting to do that show. And, we sort of got hoisted our own petard in a weird way. And again, I'm not saying this to be self-effacing. It's just that the show turned out so well after the pilot and the first couple episodes that Ethan and I were under tremendous pressure from the network and from ourselves to just keep the level of quality. It's tough. I mean, sometimes you stumble into oh man, I did something really good. How am I going to do that again? And you're just and so it was a lot of, it was great, but it was a lot of fucking work. I mean, we worked our asses off on that show to keep the level of quality. We did the pilot. It turned out really good. Okay, we got to do another episode 2's got to be just as good. Okay. Whew, okay, that was good. Episode 3, we got to do episode 3's got to be good. To keep that up, and again, these are cable seasons, we were only doing 8-10 episode seasons, but it was a tremendous amount of quality control on that show. And I remember being really burnt out at the end of season 2 and almost feeling relieved that we could move on to other things and that we didn't have to oh God, how are we going to do this for a third season? How are we going to keep it? How are we going to make it just as good? How are we going to keep that quality bar as high as it is? And again, we would have done it. We would have killed ourselves to doing it. But I just remember in a weird way sort of feeling a great weight off my shoulders of oh man, well, it sucks that we're not going to do a third season, but at least we don't have that pressure anymore. And a lot of it was self-imposed, but it's sort of that be careful what you wish for thing. Sometimes you get this shot and you sort of knock it out of the park and you're like, oh my God, I got it, but I got to do that again. I got to keep doing it. How do you do that? I'm sure athletes have that all the time, right? You hit that home run and you're like, now I'm the home run hitter. I got to do this every time.
I was less in a celebratory mood when we got canceled inside, I think.
I didn't say celebratory,
cool.
Ethan.
That's cool.
I said relieved.
No, I heard
relieved.
Everything you said. Yeah.
I said relieved.
Less in a positive mood, but it was fine. It was fine. We moved on.
Third season, I think it was just really. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the show, but there was always this. There were 2 leads. Michael Ealy played a Muslim FBI agent who had infiltrated the sleeper cell in the States that was run by a very charismatic Middle Eastern terrorist played by the actor Oded Fehr, probably most famous from being in the Mummy movies, the Brendan Fraser Mummy. He's a terrific actor. And so this was the show in some ways was a two-hander because it was the Muslim FBI agent versus the Muslim terrorists and their sort of philosophical and, issues and dynamics and going up against each other. And so the third season was going to resolve that one way or another. And because we always felt like, well, we can't keep these 2 guys, these 2 characters are the heart of the show, but we can't keep this sort of plot going on forever because we're not like 24. We're not a wacky comic book fantasy show.
I remember the third season more in some specifics of how the plot was gonna play out, which was gonna involve a radicalized American, from a particular background, and also that Michael Ealy as our FBI hero.
He was going to be a handler, wasn't he?
Was going to be a handler. Yeah, he was going to be running the undercover. Which
as
again,
opposed to being an agent in the field, he was going to be handling a new younger agent or something. Yeah.
Yeah, a new younger guy.
That may have been a very critical and award-winning success, but your biggest commercial success probably came in 2008 when your original story Kung Fu Panda gets picked up by DreamWorks Animation. Now, most of what you had written, as far as I'm aware, in both the story and the characters remained in the movie. So did you expect this to become this huge phenomenon?
I mean, there's a couple of things in that statement and question, which is very interesting. The first thing that I have to say is, like, the definition of original. In a way, Kung Fu Panda was our original story, but it was a work for hire. DreamWorks, like Cy mentioned earlier, DreamWorks had read our script to Bulletproof Monk, and they asked us to come in and have a meeting. And they talked to us about wanting to do a movie about a Kung Fu Panda. And they had actually spent like the previous year in-house with like story executives researching and writing ideas about what a Kung Fu Panda movie could be, what the plot should be. They had these like some summaries and synopses of like every samurai and Hong Kong martial arts film ever made. They had binders full of these reference materials that they had compiled over the previous year, and they had struggled to like synthesize it into a story, right? Which I don't think, for people who love storytelling, that's not such a shock, because I don't know that process they had gone through for the previous year was necessarily the best way to arrive at a cool, compelling, interesting story, right? But it did give them this like treasure trove of sort of like reference material for East Asian iconography and legends and stories and stuff, and animals, because they also listed every kind of wildlife that existed in China or whatever. It was just interesting. It was something we had never experienced before, being shown all of this reference material, and they also had somebody in-house at DreamWorks had written a version of what Kung Fu Panda was supposed to be, and so they asked us if we'd be interested in trying to rethink this or come back with a version of it that they'd be excited enough to want to try and start down the road to making it into a movie. And the truth is, of that entire like encyclopedia of material that they ended up presenting to us, the one thing that I have to give DreamWorks Animation profound credit and due for is the title Kung Fu Panda, because that's amazing. It's just, I remember, Cy and I, when we left, we're like, man, that's just great. Like,
it's a hilarious title. It's a great title.
You could come up with a lot of different things, and they could all be potentially cool. The things that they had come up with were not so cool in our estimation, or give them credit in their estimation, because they had decided it was time to get outside, writers. And we weren't the only people they interviewed about this project or talked to.
Here's the three things that we contributed and we came up with for Kung Fu Panda, which I think are hugely important to the success of the movie. The idea that the Kung Fu Panda Po was going to be a huge fan of martial arts and Kung Fu people, even though he couldn't do Kung Fu himself. This is directly inspired from an old Jackie Chan movie called Drunken Master, where Jackie Chan works at the Kung Fu studio. He's the janitor. He cleans up at the Kung Fu studio, but he can't do Kung Fu himself. But he's a huge fan of all these great Kung Fu masters and would desperately want to learn Kung Fu. And the idea that like a overweight, out of shape panda could be like the biggest fan of martial arts, it was like, that was just a very charming, fun idea. That's something that Ethan and I came up with. We also came up with the Furious Five, which ironically are inspired or named after it used to be one of the early rap hip hop bands was Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five.
Yeah.
Google it, kids.
that the different martial arts styles being based on or inspired by the movements and the fighting stances of different kinds of animals, which from the minute that we left the office with the concept, the movie's going to be called Kung Fu Panda. Both Cy and I, when we got out of the office, we were like, animal styles. We've got to use that. We've got to use
Tiger style, mantis style. So the idea was like, just make those animals. Those are the animals that are in the movies. That's the Furious Five. And then the third thing is the bad guy, Tai Lung, who actually is named after a very big Hong Kong movie star, action star from the 70s and 80s named Tai Lung, who actually co-stars in Better Tomorrow, Andrew.
The older brother. Yeah.
Yes. So, and it's funny. Nobody ever picks that up. It's so obvious to us. Like, oh, it's Tai Lung. Why hasn't anybody picked it up? But
I will add one other thing. I think you got to add a fourth thing, Cy, which is that Cy and myself, Cy mostly because as a kid growing up, he'd been a huge Kung Fu movie fan and just sort of like lived and breathed that stuff, and myself because when I was a little younger than when we got onto Kung Fu Panda, I had gone to China to work on a low budget movie for a friend of mine who was directing it, and I worked as the assistant director in Beijing, and I had met my future wife there, and then I'd gone back the next year, gotten married, spent a decent amount of time in China, come back to the U.S. with my wife, and had started a family, had kids, and gone back and forth. So half of my family, literally, were Chinese, and the other element that Cy and I definitely laid the groundwork and foundation for, and contributed to in the movie is a sincere love and respect for Chinese culture and Chinese martial arts. And even though the project was always a comedy and it was always filled with humor, all the comedy and all the humor from us in the beginning of the project was always with the environment and with the context and with the martial arts and with the characters. It was never at their expense. It always came from a place of really deep and sincere, respect and even like love and to some extent admiration.
yeah, it was funny. I was going to say that it was interesting because we worked on the movie, I think, for a little over a year, and then we went on actually to do Sleeper Cell, and we got a call a couple years later from an executive at DreamWorks who said, "Hey, we actually have a rough cut of Kung Fu Panda done, and you guys want to come in and check it out?" And we were like, oh, Jesus, it's been like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. I mean, is there anything left of our movie in there, our script? And he said, oh, yeah, it's mostly your script because we've been developing it for 4 years. We basically threw everything out and went back to the original version that you guys wrote. So there's a lot of your stuff in the movie. So it was the whole point is that the reason all that stuff is still there is because the final directors that actually did the movie, John Osborne, I forget the other director's name, basically literally went back to, I think, the original story treatment that Ethan and I had written, and that's what they sort of based the movie off of. And again, at that point, we were off doing Sleeper Cell, and they brought in 2 really great comedy writers, animation guys, to do sort of the final passes and the dialogue passes and everything. And but that's why we ended up still getting story credit on the movie, and why it's a movie we're still intimately involved with, because it went through those years and years and years of development, and then sort of was almost like a circle. They came right back to sort of the version that Ethan and I had worked on for that year, in, I think, I want to say like 2002, 2003. And and the movie's great. It turned out great.
It is.
And it's
It's
you know it's funny.
it's probably the best quality feature film that our names are in the credits of. Honestly, I mean, we love a lot of our work, and certainly Demon Knight is awesome. But overall, at least for me, if I had to rate, what's the best movie that our names are in the credits of, it would probably be Kung Fu Panda.
Also, it's a movie that our kids could watch because the joke is almost everything we had written up to that point was all like rated R or for grown-ups or for adults. And at that point we all had kids. So it was like, oh, finally. Though the whole joke is from when we wrote it to when the movie came out, our kids had aged. I jokingly say our kids were just right on the cusp they were just young enough to still think Kung Fu Panda was cool when it came out. And had it come out like 2 years later, we would have been screwed all over again because our kids would have been too old and like, this movie's stupid. But they were just young enough that it was a cool thing.
Well, in 2010, Ridley Scott directs Robin Hood, starring Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Now, this was developed from your script, Nottingham, which was basically Sherwood Holmes, I guess.
Yeah, it's good. I've never
where
heard that before. That's great.
No.
Sherwood Holmes. Perfect.
And this is basically where the Sheriff of Nottingham was basically kind of like a forensic detective, and Robin Hood was the bad guy, which sounds just awesome.
It really does.
So Russell Crowe apparently thought so as well. The script kind of became the subject of a bidding war. And how did all of this start, and what happened once the war was won by, I guess it was Imagine Entertainment?
Man, it all started. I'm the big history guy writ large, and then I'm a big medieval history guy when you drill down into my particular areas of obsessive interest. And over the years of Cy and my professional partnership, I guess I had talked to him about different possible medieval period pieces that we might write as a spec script, meaning something we just write on our own on speculation and then put out into the marketplace, and you hope that somebody bites and wants to buy it. And at some point, I think it may have started while we were actually at the end of our Kung Fu Panda writing experience. Either Cy or maybe I was pushing Cy about some medieval idea, and maybe Cy said, if we do Robin Hood, at least Robin Hood, I mean, I'll care about Robin Hood enough that I might want to do a medieval movie or write a medieval movie. And because, it's an iconic pop culture character, right? He is an iconic pop culture character. And that struck both of us like, it's been a while since there's been a major studio Robin Hood movie, and maybe we could do that. And then we started talking about it, and the idea of flip it on its head and tell it through a different perspective from a different POV, which screamed out to us as, well, the sheriff. The sheriff of Nottingham is one of the biggest villains in storytelling history. Why don't we just make him the hero? And that kind of stuck, as something that just seemed interesting and compelling to the two of us. Unlike Ridley Scott, jumping ahead to years down the line when the project actually went forward. And so later on, we actually sat down, we worked out, what the story would be. Robin Hood didn't really play the part of the villain. He's introduced as a potential villain, and he's definitely a rogue, but in the end, he's more of just a sort of like bad boy, who gets embraced by the powers that be because they can sort of use him to attain their own political ends. Whereas the sheriff is not a sort of popular, he's not somebody to wave a flag about and raise the people's enthusiasm for. So he sort of just gets kicked to the side of the curb, and that's just the life of a public servant, cop / local leader.
And there was a love triangle with Maid Marian between the sheriff and Robin Hood and Maid Marian. And again, the sheriff being sort of like beleaguered, ironbound man of integrity, public servant, and Robin
Yeah.
Hood being like the sexy rogue bad boy. And
Yeah.
of course, Maid Marian ends up going for the sexy rogue bad boy at the end.
And the other cool element that we incorporated into our screenplay was Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine, having a big part in the story, who, is the wife of one French king, then the wife of an English king, then the mother of like 2 or 3 different English kings. And at the time of the story that we were telling, Richard the Lionheart is a prisoner in Germany because he went off to the Crusades and then he got captured on his way home. And his brother John is the prince, and his mother, who prefers Richard over John, is just trying to sort of like keep John from taking over everything back in England. And so that was sort of like the backdrop, the environment, whatever, that the Robin Hood and the sheriff and Marian story took place in front of. And we wrote the script, and it was a big success for us. Russell Crowe's agent read it and gave it to Russell Crowe to read, and Russell Crowe signed on to play the sheriff, which was amazing. And it went out, and like I think you mentioned, there was actually a bidding war, that's the first time in our careers that had happened. It means more than one company wanted to buy this item from us, which is the best situation if you're selling something that you could find yourself in, right? And in the end, like you said, Imagine Entertainment, was also attached, and we sold it to Universal. We actually sold it for a tiny bit less money to Universal than some other studio had offered because of Imagine's relationship with them, and I guess Russell Crowe's relationship with them. They had just sort of like been making this other movie with him, the American Gangster, right, with Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington. And it was like the greatest triumph of our careers at the time. And then, Side, you want to pick it up from that high point where we had all the money?
Here's the joke.
All the joy.
And then Ridley Scott got involved. And then what happened was the studio, what everyone fell in love with was this notion of, we're going to reunite Ridley Scott and Russell Crowe doing a period sword action movie. And nothing else mattered at that point. And so what happened was Ridley Scott, who never really liked the script, I think he was like, who cares about this? Everybody knows Robin Hood. Nobody gives a shit about the sheriff. Nottingham's a dumb title. Everybody in England will think it's about a soccer team, a football team. It was just like Ridley Scott hated the script. So the last thing you want is the director who signs on to hate the script, right? There was a version early on when it had not totally morphed into I always say, Robin Hood origin story with a 45-year-old Robin Hood. Very, very ultimately bizarre choice. There was a version early on when Russell Crowe was going to still playing the sheriff. Sienna Miller was going to play Maid Marian, and Sam Riley was actually playing Robin Hood.
Okay.
If you know Sam Riley, he played Ian Curtis in the Joy Division movie Control, and amongst other things. And that was sort of cool. But basically, Ridley hated the script so much that they literally spent, as Ethan said, they spent 2 or 3 years like redeveloping the script, because I think Universal, and I also think Russell Crowe, kept pushing back, like, well, Ridley, this is still a good idea. We should do this. And so really, I hate this idea. And so there were all these different versions trying to somehow keep some sense of the original concept. There was one where Robin Hood was the sheriff by day, and then he would put on a hood and he would be Robin Hood at night. There were all kind of crazy
like
versions.
The Zorro version.
Yeah, there were crazy versions for years, and then finally everybody just threw up their hands and were like, "Okay, let Ridley do his Robin Hood movie."
Yeah,
Um,
I can imagine him
and
being there
that's
like this Robin Hood movie is terrible, but don't worry, Prometheus is going to be great.
Oh, you had to bring up Prometheus, didn't you?
exactly.
God.
Prometheus dig, random Prometheus
Oh
dig.
man.
Look, here's what I'll say. The
Oh
Ridley
man.
Scott Robin Hood is not a terrible movie. It's not a great movie.
No,
It's
not at
just
all.
okay.
Not at all.
It's just a typically, well produced. It's okay. It's not bad. I think in a
And
weird
it's got
way,
those. It's the only time you'll ever see World War II landing craft deployed in the
in medieval, yeah,
12th
medieval
century.
times.
Yeah.
I will say that it still has it has a similar structure to our original script in that it opens with that battle in the Crusades and sort of leads into like going back to England, to Nottingham, to that element, and then also
that
Eleanor of
has
Aquitaine.
Eleanor, yeah.
Yeah, she's not as big a part as we had her in our script, but she still has a somewhat legit part in the movie. So those are sort of like the last dregs holdover of what we had written, originally. But yeah, as Ethan always says, it was the greatest triumph of our career that became probably the biggest disappointment. Because I still think it's a great idea for a Robin Hood movie, and ironically, Russell Crowe would have been great as the sheriff. Because again, Russell Crowe has that gravitas, and the idea of a guy like Russell Crowe going up against a more flamboyant, I'm the rogue Robin Hood. I'm like the bad boy all the chicks dig, and I'm like hanging out in the woods and robbing from the rich. And then here's this sort of just like hardcore, dude, you're an outlaw. I got to do my job. I got to bring you in. That sort of those two characters butting heads, it would have been really fun. But, maybe there's an alternate multiverse someplace where that movie actually got made.
Yeah,
and
and we'd always envisioned Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell would have been great.
Great Robin Hood. Young Colin Farrell. That's right.
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
He could potentially be playing the sheriff roundabout now, though, couldn't he?
Or he could play the cartographer who gets lost.
Yeah.
There you go. I did feel bad for Russell Crowe though, because all the stories were like, oh, Russell Crowe has to get into shape to play this movie, and he's got to bicycle 10 hours a day and stop drinking and all this stuff. And you've noticed when you see the final movie, there's one scene where Russell Crowe takes his shirt off. And this guy, he's sucking it in, man. Russell is like sucking it in. It's like, I got to get through this one shot with my shirt off, and then I'm fine. But it is, like I said, it's a weird movie because it's a Robin Hood. Ridley decided to do a Robin Hood origin story with a 45-year-old leading man. I just don't understand. I still don't understand it. It's just strange. Shouldn't Robin Hood be at the end of his career when he's Russell Crowe's age? I don't get it. Anyhow.
No, I've got the extended version of Robin Hood on Blu-ray here that I still never have watched.
Man, I didn't know that they had released an extended version.
Extended version. Oh my God.
You know, the one thing I agree with what Cy said. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's a particularly good movie. I think it's a kind of like, it's okay. It's a mediocre but very well made. The one thing that I think is exceptionally good about that movie is the end credits, the visuals on the end credits, which are like art. They're like some kind of, and I've never looked into it. I don't know where they came from.
It's like animated watercolor.
It's just really, I mean, at least for me, when I saw it, I was struck by, wow, maybe there was a reason for me to sit through the previous, however many hours that was, because these end credits are really cool. Maybe not really worth sitting through all that, but
hey,
really
Ethan,
cool.
I don't know why it popped into my head, but you talk about thematically. For some reason, there's a line that Eleanor of Aquitaine says at the end of our Robin Hood script to the sheriff, and she says something like, "Men like you, who are steeped in law and arithmetic, help a kingdom to function, but the kingdom wouldn't exist without men like Robin Hood, because these are the kind of guys that make men proud to be English." And in a weird way, it was sort of like the notion of people that do the real work versus like celebrity culture in an odd way. I think that's something else that was sort of fun about that script and sort of interesting, was the notion that Robin Hood's like the hero. He's got all the trappings of a hero. Of course, people are going to rally around this guy. He's a natural born leader. He's charismatic. He's sexy. The girls love him. But really, the sheriff is the guy that gets the shit done, who gets no acclaim, who's stuck in a dead end job, right? Oh man, I'm here and now I got to raise taxes because Richard's kidnapped and
I think it might have been that she mentioned Robin Hood and her son the king, Richard, because that was another aspect of the screenplay, was that Richard was a guy who really liked going off to war and slaughtering the enemy and speaking French poetry, and couldn't even speak the English language, had no interest in speaking it, even though he was the king of England. Whatever. Yeah, those were all things that were in that were part of that screenplay.
Well, it just goes to prove that no matter how rich you are, you still need someone to clean the toilets.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's
oddly
funny,
enough. One of the opening... Well, go ahead, Cy.
No, I was going to say it's funny because this phenomenon of something getting so totally changed that it's almost unrecognizable, I realized this is as old as the history of Hollywood. I was watching Sunset Boulevard recently, the great Billy Wilder movie with William Holden. And William Holden's a screenwriter. And he has literally a line in the movie. He says, I wrote a movie about Depression-era farmers in the Dust Bowl, and they finally made it, and it's a submarine picture. So, the idea that like an Okie movie in the Dust Bowl could become a submarine movie, a war, it's like this has always been going on. It's the idea that this sort of revisionist Robin Hood movie becomes like just this sort of generic. It got changed so much. It's like it's as old as Hollywood history.
Okay. Well, okay. When working with other writers, what advice would you give to new writers that are entering the field who have to relinquish part of their script to others?
I mean, look, the process is inherently collaborative. If you want to write something and have it be 100% yours, you should write novels or write poetry. Maybe
or write screenplays on your own, and then you have to collaborate in order for it to actually get.
No, but if you want to write movies to get them made, I mean, the point is that it's a collaborative medium. You can't. A screenplay is a blueprint. It's not a literary work on its own, though I think, obviously you aspire to write something that's well written, and there's probably some screenplays that are incredibly well written. At the end of the day, it's like a blueprint for a house, You can have the greatest blueprint, but then you still need all these people to come together to build your house. So I think the problem is writing is, as Ethan says earlier, such an intimate thing, and you put so much of yourself into a screenplay, and yet your ego has to be strong enough to like hand that over to directors, producers, actors who want to change the dialogue, directors who want to change the scene from a cool construction site to an abandoned warehouse. And sometimes sometimes these decisions are positive, and we have two extreme examples. I think the people that made Kung Fu Panda took our original script and enhanced it and kept what was great about it and made it better. I think Ridley Scott did the exact opposite to our Robin Hood movie. He basically took something that was original and fresh and interesting and made it something you've seen 1,000 times before. But this is the job, unfortunately.
So I'll answer it. I'll answer it in the other context, in terms of a writer who's debating or choosing whether they should write screenplays or movies or television shows alone, on their own, or in partnership with somebody else, the way Cy and I have worked for more than 3 decades, right? And my answer is, it's a trade-off. There are things that you will gain. You will gain the fact that two heads are better than one. Cliches exist for a reason. Most of the time it's because they hold profound truths, right? At least that's my opinion. Two heads are better than one. You get to do twice as much thinking, twice as much work at in the same time. If one of the two people involved is having a bad day or having a bad week or not feeling the material, the other one probably isn't suffering those same challenges, right? And can help the person who's not feeling it up and further along. Every piece of material has to get through the filter or the judgment or the taste of another person before it ever gets out to the outside world, where it will be judged in incredibly harsh terms if you're trying to be a professional or a successful professional, right? So those are all absolute benefits of having a writing partner. The downside is much more narrow and specific, which is, if you're somebody who believes deep down inside that your original creative material or whatever, your writing ability, because maybe nowadays most of your work you'll be paid for is to adapt or remake, rewrite things that have already existed in the past or in other mediums. If you believe your writing talent is enough that somebody should pay you just to do that, then you probably believe that your sort of vision and concept of what the story should be is pretty valuable and has some weight and inherent value on its own, right? And once you become joined at the hip and a partner with somebody else, that will never be the case. It will never just be your creative voice on the page. And, different people give different weight, to the two sides of that. And some come down on one side and some come down on the other side. Si's take is, no matter what, if you're working in movies or TV, you're going to have to give up, pieces of your creative vision anyway. You have to be just as collaborative with the actors and the director and the producers and the editors and the cameraman and the prop department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess there's some legitimacy to that, but I think that's a little bit different from giving up the singular, control of what you're putting on the page before you send it out into the world and sharing that with somebody else. The two of us kind of lucked out by having enough regard and respect for each other's talent or creative content that we were able to embrace that. When the two of us team up and write something, I think both of us obviously think it's worth more than if we were writing it separately, as opposed to less. Otherwise, we wouldn't still be doing that.
Well, I guess now it's time to hear these two guys nominate 5.
Now's the time to nominate 5.
Nominate 5?
Yes, nominate 5. Not 3 or 4 or 6 or 9. Now's the time to nominate 5.
I'd be amazed if they didn't have 6 or 9. But I think
it'd be like when we had David Marciano on and he had a nominate 26 or something or whatever it was.
He kept going right up until the end music was going. It was
Pretty
amazing.
much, yeah.
Can I nominate the Nominate 5 theme song as one of the greatest theme songs of all time?
Oh, yes, but you've not heard nothing yet.
No. It's going to be winning a Grammy next year.
There's a sequel coming, eh?
There's another section after this one, don't worry.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what is Nominate 5?
Well, Nominate 5 is the part of the show where we invite our guests, if we have one, to nominate 5 of their favourite things. It's usually very, very specific to a guest. And this week, because our particular guests are so fond of their Chinese martial arts movies, we've invited them to nominate their 5 favourite Hong Kong action films.
Okay. So, I'm not even going to bother with a particular order. Because
I
it
don't
never
want, I don't
works
even want to
ever.
say it, but that's not exactly right because they're not all martial arts or even action movies, but they're all Hong Kong movies. So
Okay.
All Hong
that's
Kong
cool.
movies. Okay.
Hong Kong. That'll be fine. Who's going to go first? Number 5.
Go.
Yeah. All right. So I'll start. What'll I start with? Um, I'll start with one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express, which
Brilliant.
is an incredible movie. It's got two stories. It's got great use of Hong Kong locations. It's got incredible music. It's got an incredible cast. If you ask me what is it about, I would say that's a good question. It's about relationships and personal connections and being young and living in a city. And I'm a person who loves hard and fast story and structure. And Chunking Express has virtually no hard and fast story and structure, but it's so brilliantly made and so incredible to watch. And it also packs a ton of emotion into its stories. It's two stories, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Awesome.
Very
Okay.
good recommendation.
Cyrus, what have you got for us?
I'm gonna say Project A Part 2, which is you have to pick a Jackie Chan movie, which is a movie Jackie Chan stars in and also directed. A sequel to Project A, which is a period
Canadian
period
piece.
almost no the period doesn't even matter. It's like a period sailor movie. Jackie Chan plays a sailor in the Royal Hong Kong Navy, yet there's very little sailing involved. It's just hilarious, amazing action. It's got some of the greatest Jackie Chan, I think, action in any of his movies. There's a scene where he's handcuffed to another guy and they're being chased by axe wielding psychopaths. And if you've ever seen two people handcuffed together try to dodge flying axes, it's one of the most insane things you've ever seen in your life, and hilarious and great. Project A Part 2, one of the best Jackie Chan Hong Kong movies.
Very good choice. Very good choice. Okay. So we come back to Ethan for I guess our third.
That's going to be another period piece, and I will pick Peking Opera Blues, which is a movie that I know both Cy and I love tremendously, which we saw in a theater, and God, man, it's so good. It's a story about set in China while the European powers have most of the power in China, and the Chinese nationalists and the students are trying to right some wrongs, both from foreigners and from the sort of dysfunctional and oppressive Qing dynasty government. And it's an incredible girl power story from. I mean, the movie was made in 1986 in Hong Kong by Zhu Hark, who's an incredibly talented director, and it's really a story of these three very different young women from different backgrounds in China who team up to save the day. And again, it's got great music. It's got a very sincere dramatic story, but it's also got great humor. And then it's just got like incredible sort of like ironic twists on what your expectations are coming in. And it's got Lin Xingsha, also known as Bridget Lind, who's just like one of the greatest actresses from any part of China who ever lived.
Okay.
That's great. I've not actually seen this one. I'm going to have to hunt this one down myself.
Right, so now we're on to number 2 in our countdown, which isn't a countdown. So, Cyrus, what have you got for us?
I'm gonna go with probably the best known Hong Kong movie, The Killer, directed by John Woo, starring Chow Yun Fat. Um, it's a cliche to say how influential and great this movie is, but it's all, as Ethan says, all cliches are somewhat based in profound truths. This movie has some of the most amazing gun battles in the history of cinema. It's sort of batshit crazy and operatic at the same time. It's about an assassin and a cop that go up against each other and ultimately have to team up to kill hundreds of bad guys in a church. It's again great
With
music,
dubs.
amazing action. I mean, this was the movie that sort of established John Woo, and I would say probably was the breakout Hong Kong movie that got people sort of interested in this stuff. And again, it's not martial arts, it's really the origin of what has now been known to be called gun fu as opposed to
Yeah.
kung fu, because there's a lot of physical fighting interwoven with gunplay, which had never been done before, really. And it's just a ridiculously phenomenal movie, anchored by the amazing movie star charisma of Chow Yun-fat, who plays the killer, not the cop, which is funny because I always think in the American version, the big star would play the cop probably, but in the Hong Kong version, of course, he plays the cool killer. Yeah, John Woo's the killer, classic, great movie.
Yeah, I have this here on DVD in the original Cantonese and bad Cockney dub, as all of our movies were released. So yeah,
Do what? Cockney dub.
yeah.
It's hilarious.
To what? You shoot my brother. Yeah, it's an amazing movie. It was one of the films that I discovered Chow Yun-fat as well when it got released on VHS over here.
I'm sorry, all I can picture right now is Danny Dyer being brought in to do a dub.
Oh, you should hear the English dub of Hard Boiled. It is hilarious.
But do they have British accents? Is there like literally
Yeah.
a UK version with British accents? That's hilarious.
Yeah, I will have to send you. I'll send you a DVD version of Hard Boiled that's dubbed into English by English actors.
That's
And
hilarious.
it's hilarious. You can't even take it as a serious movie. It's that bad.
Huh.
Okay, so I guess we're at the top pick now, the last one. So
Yeah.
what do we have, Ethan?
We have On the Run, which
On the Run.
is an incredible movie. I know I keep saying that Cy and I saw in a movie theater in Chinatown, and it really blew our minds. A very grim, gritty story about a cop who's divorced, and his wife is assassinated by a female assassin, and he ends up in a buddy movie with the female assassin who was hired to kill his ex-wife, going on the run from the people who hired her, who are corrupt cops inside Hong Kong, with his young grade school age daughter. And the three of them become kind of a family, and the worst possible things that could happen that you would not believe commercial filmmakers would actually deliver on happen. And it's just a gut-wrenching, emotional roller coaster that's actually really believable and seems like it could really be happening on the streets and alleyways of Hong Kong. And it's just an incredible movie that showed me inside that we could cross certain lines and do things that we didn't think before we saw it we could get away with, in our own screenwriting and storytelling. And the female lead is played by this incredible actress named Pat Ha. And the guy, the cop, is oddly played by a kung fu star who does like no kung fu in the movie, because the movie is very gritty and much more like a French Connection type of tone than what you might expect from a Hong Kong, action movie. The only thing close to kung fu he does is one insane stunt when he has to jump off a roof and grab onto a lamppost on the street and slide down the lamppost in order to escape the killers who are chasing after him. And it sounds it sounds over the top and it's almost like bordering on impossible, but it's he really did it, and it's believable when it happens because he did it in real life.
Well, actually, it's funny, Ethan. Even that is subverted because he actually falls off the lamppost and lands hard on the roof of a car. So
Yeah.
even his big stunt is sort of like dirtied up and grittied up because
Undercut,
it got
yeah.
undercut in this sort of and made sort of rougher and more violent. Yern Biao was actually a classmate of Jackie Chan's and came up with Jackie Chan in like Kung Fu school and everything. And he's actually in a lot of Jackie Chan movies as like Jackie Chan's like Kung Fu fighting buddy or something. But this is an incredibly dark, incredibly gritty movie. It's directed by a guy named Alfred Chung, who I think was primarily a screenwriter in Hong Kong. This is the only crime movie he directed. And it's really obscure. Again, it's called On the Run, sort of a generic title for a really Ethan, I would say this movie is almost more like a William Friedkin. If William Friedkin,
Absolutely,
I
was gonna say
William
Friedkin,
Friedkin, or maybe
I said
Michael
French
Mann,
Connection, right? Yeah,
right, or maybe Michael Mann directed a Hong Kong movie.
Yeah,
That's what this
exactly.
movie is
Wow.
like.
Yeah,
So
and also
look it up, dig it out.
also a great soundtrack, a great sort
Great
of
score.
quiet but impactful. Low key. I shouldn't say quiet, low key, but very impactful soundtrack. Yeah.
One last thing I'll say about more the experience is what's sort of funny about this. Sometimes you'll go to see like we'd always used to go see these double bills. Like the Hong Kong movies would play in Chinatown, and they would play two movies. And it's sort of, and I've had this experience at rep houses, like, oh, I'm gonna go see Double Indemnity, which I've never seen, and that's a famous movie. And what's the second movie? Oh, it's this other Billy Wilder movie called Ace in the Hole. And you go see Double Indemnity, and it's great. And you stay for the second movie, Ace in the Hole, and you've never heard of it, and it blows you away, and it's even better than Double Indemnity.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of what happened with On the Run. It was like it was the second feature to like a Jackie Chan movie or something.
Yeah.
So of course we all went to see the Jackie Chan movie, and oh, let's stay and see this other weird movie, On the Run, and it just blew us away, and it was like amazing. And so always remember that, because it was like that sort of hidden second movie that you don't think is going to be any good and you've never heard of. And then it turns out to be like, holy crap, that's incredible, So a fun discovery. So that's our top 5, or our big 5, or what is it called? 5
Nominate
To nominate
five.
Nominate
Yes.
5.
And they were
That's
great.
it.
No, that's
thanks.
a great selection. I want to go and check those two movies out myself to add to my ever-growing collection if it comes to it.
It's awesome that you already have 3 of them, though.
Oh, yeah, well, I've just been a huge fan of it ever since the 80s, since, the Jackie Chan movies were released, even like some of the most obscure ones, Chinese Ghost Story, 2000 AD,
Yeah, great.
Iron Monkey, pretty much everything. I collect all of the Hong Kong Legends DVD collection, which
Awesome.
I have to upgrade to Blu-ray, but you miss a lot of the actual features that are on the DVDs. Well, we've got one section of the show left, but before we get into that, just want to ask you guys, okay, do you have anything coming out, anything to promote, anything people should be looking out for that's coming out shortly?
Yeah, what are you working on?
Well, what we're working on is always like stuff. It's sort of okay. So that's 2 questions. What we're working on now is like stuff that's not announced yet, or there's no point to talk about it because it's nothing you can run out and see. But I will plug 2 things. We have 2 shows on Netflix right now that we worked on. We have, ironically, Ethan and I did a show for Netflix in India called Bard of Blood, which is a thriller, a suspense thriller about an Indian Shakespeare professor who's a former CIA, or not CIA, but a former spy who's brought back into the field to get involved in this international case. And it's actually a show. It's like an Indian show. But Ethan and I went to India and basically helped exec produce this show for Netflix. And it's in English and Hindi, so you can watch it, and it's actually a pretty cool suspense thriller. And then Ethan, the other show we worked on is Nightfall, which with a K, which is a Knights Templar medieval show. Ethan and I would say this: there's 2 seasons, 2 series on Netflix right now. The first season is not that great. The second season was the season Ethan and I were involved in, and it actually features, believe it or not, Mark Hamill playing a crazy sort of medieval drill instructor for these Knights Templar. And if you want to see Mark Hamill actually curse on film for the first time, he drops the F-bomb, says a few. He's like this tough as nails medieval, like I guess it's sort of a version of a badass Jedi Knight in medieval times, and it's a lot of fun. And
he does have his version of a scratchy British accent also. So
yes, exactly. Mark Hamill does his scratchy British accent.
I'll mention one project that isn't out and streamable or viewable, watchable yet, but to keep your eye out for potentially in the near future, which is a project called the Astronaut Instruction Manual, which is sort of inspired by a young adult book, which is pretty cool if you have young kids or if you have elementary through middle school age kids, or maybe even high school kids, about what you have to do to prepare and train and be ready to be an astronaut in space, or even potentially like work in here on Earth in the space industry, which is a pretty interesting, cool project we've done.
But it's not completed yet or out or anything, but to look for in the future potentially.
Well, you'll definitely let us know, and when it's due to come out and release, we will obviously give it a nice promotion for you guys.
Totally.
That'd be great. Thanks.
And oh my God, Steve, it is that time for What's in the Box.
What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box?
Oh yes, what's in the box?
What the hell is in the box, Steve?
That's a good question, Steve.
The head of a Spinal Tap drummer? I don't know.
I don't rightly know. No, I don't know.
Right, Steve, what's in the box, Steve?
Sorry, I was very, very close to doing a Del Preston impression there, but I know that Ralph Brown would kill me.
Yes.
What's in the Box is the part of the show where Andy tries to just basically tear me away from my Xbox and get me down in front of some actually half-decent films for once. He's got a box full of, well, movie titles, and he's going to put his hand into the box and pull one out. Now, if I have seen it, he's going to keep on pulling out different titles until we find one that I haven't seen, and then I'm going to go away and watch it the day Sorry, it was just throwing bad laughter. I'm going to watch it the day before we record our next show.
Just as we do every week.
Every week.
Right, are you ready, Steve?
Lots of people like this, which is strange considering how unfair I was to 2001, but carry on.
Okay, yes, you were very unkind to 2001. Okay, let's have a look here. First one out. You've got Disney Pixar's Ratatouille.
Yes.
You have seen it?
I have seen it, yeah.
That one's gone.
Wait, are you going to give us your thumbnail review?
No, we're waiting for something he hasn't seen.
Yes.
I know, but I'm just thumbs up or thumbs down on Ratatouille.
It's kind of like a thumb in the middle, really.
Okay.
It's not my favorite Pixar.
Yeah.
This might be the greatest day of my life. Steve.
Yes.
Paul Feige's Ghostbusters is fun.
No, you
Okay, to explain here, he has refused to watch this movie forever.
No.
Right? And I said it was in the box and you were going to get it one day, and I finally pulled it out of the box.
There you go,
You
Steve.
absolutely.
You have to watch it. You have to watch it now.
I've been avoiding this movie since it came out. I really have.
And now you have to go and watch it.
These are the rules of what's in the box, apparently, Steve. You've got to watch it.
He's the biggest Ghostbusters fan on the planet of the original Ghostbusters, and
No, good for him. I'm with him. That's cool.
yeah. But now you have to go and watch the Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig version that you have.
Can I not just watch Afterlife again?
No, because I might pull The Last Jedi out after it. So
rough,
rough.
Ooh.
yeah, take Ghostbusters while you can. The rules are you have to watch no matter what comes out of that box. Blame yourself for the fact that you've already seen Ratatouille. You could have got away with it. So there you go.
Is
So,
it
yes.
too late to claim amnesia and
No.
go back? Oh, Jesus.
No,
Okay.
you know what? I'm so looking forward to that episode because I know you are going to be spitting fire at that review of that movie. Anyway, while he goes and sulks in the corner, I just want to say an absolutely huge thank you to Cyrus Voris and Ethan Reiff for coming onto our show these past however many weeks. It has been an absolute pleasure having on, and I know there was so much more we needed to talk about, but it's good that we can actually hopefully get you back on again to cover other things, especially stuff like the Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers for Cyrus. And for Ethan, obviously, we want to talk about your foray into the Lawnmower Man, the best adaptation of the Lawnmower Man away from the Brett Leonard movie. As well as other projects that we've kind of skirted around and missed out on this talk. But we just want to say a huge thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure having
Thank
you
you
on.
very much.
Thank you. It's been.
Oh,
it's
hey,
been
you're very
fun.
welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for
thanks to
having
you
us.
guys for inviting us on. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us here on our meager little British podcast.
Yes, where most of our audience are all American.
This is true, actually. Yeah.
American people in the industry. So Ridley
That's
Scott's going to give us
hilarious.
a call next week saying, "Excuse me."
Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. Me
No,
and Peter,
no, I don't.
me and Peter Horton are sat here.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Those bastards
Yeah,
are
you can
taking
shut
the
down a
nick.
podcast while it's happening.
Those bastards.
How dare you? A god of cinema.
I was gonna say this is the worst Ridley Scott impression ever, but it's still making me laugh.
I don't understand. It has no connection. It's like
Oh, my
EastEnders. Ridley Scott isn't from there.
I directed
Okay.
Blade Runner. Yeah.
That's like, oh man. Oh man.
It's
just
like,
some-
it's like
Oh,
some
Ridley
geezer from the
decided he
pub who
wanted to be
thinks
an
he's
actor in a
really
Guy
smart.
Ritchie movie.
That's it exactly.
God.
Lock, stock, and two smoking Scots. Boom. Oh.
Oh no!
brilliant.
Oh my goodness gracious! Classic.
Well, that is actually it for our show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. We will be back next week. We don't have any idea who the guest is going to be because we've got about 10 lined up who are just trying to actually get their availability. So you'll find out when we do.
Yes.
But in the meantime, guys, look after yourself. I hope to talk to you again very shortly.
Yes. So from me, it is a goodbye. From Andy, it is a goodbye. And from our guests, it is a goodbye. And for you, goodbye.
Ethan sent top 5 Hong Kong directors, but the problem
Okay.
is
No, that's good.
there's only like
5.
4 or 5.
There's 5. No, there's a lot more than that.
You
but-
listed 4 and 2 alternates, so there's really only.
Well,
5
no,
or
I
6.
listed 4 plus 1, choice that I thought we would both agree about.
All right, then. How about your top 5 favorite Hong Kong films?
Ooh, interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because you
That's
guys have
more
said
of
that
a-
that's had a big influence on you. So
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's a great one actually, because we haven't talked about that in years.
Here's what
and-
we should do. We're gonna agree on most of them, but we should just alternate, and then we can pick one. Then
No,
why don't
but
we do?
or
No, let's
alternate?
do this. Wait, yeah, no, listen. Ethan, you do your. No, seriously, listen. We'll alternate, and when we get to the fifth one, then you and I have to pick one that we'll agree on. How about
Yeah,
that?
okay. I mean, I
That sounds
think we'll
solid.
agree on. I think we'll agree on.
No, we'll
a lot
agree
of
on
them,
all of them,
obviously.
all of them. But I'm just saying that let's do it that way.
Okay.
Hold
all
on.
right.
Hold
Let's-
on one
let's go for it.
second. You get.
Okay.
Give me.
So note
give
them
me
down.
1 second, because I got to check. There's one that I always.
Okay.
Forget.
So while you quickly write them down, and as soon as you've got them, we'll do an introduction.
Yes. Well, we need to do the intro, the segue into Nominate 5 as well,
With music.
with music.
Very exciting.
Because I can't just bring the music in.
With music. All right, you're warning us that it's going to come.
Yes. Yes.
I
We're
don't
warning
think
you
you've heard the music.
and begging you not to leave.
What is the music? I'm curious.
Okay.
Okay, have you got your ones written down?
Written down. Oh, we got to write.
Or
it
if you know
down.
them off the top of your head, that's even better.
Well, wait. No, listen. Give us like 30 seconds. So, Ethan,
Yeah.
what you pick
Oh,
two.
see, but isn't this? Oh, this isn't. Yeah, we don't want this on live.
No,
we don't want them
pick-
to see
pick-
into the sausage factory.
Okay.
Hold on.
And Ethan loves hot dog, which is a form of sausage.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
We
Okay,
could just
Ethan.
release this segment, and it'd be brilliant.
There you
No,
go.
we can't
Well,
really.
are you guys recording? You can you can
No.
put anything out.
No.
Oh no, you should be recording
Yeah.
this.
God, there's so
Okay,
many to
Ethan.
choose from, too.
Ethan, but wait a minute. Okay, obviously, let's just say we can all actually agree. There's the killer, right? That's got to be in the 5.
Yeah, I would put Better Tomorrow above the killer, actually. But yes.
What about Fallen Angels? Angels. Wong
Yeah,
Kar-wai?
absolutely. But also Chungking Express. But can we put more than one Wong Kar-wai movie on? I guess we
but
could.
if we're gonna do 5,
have-
and what about On the Run, which is the
No,
most
but I would
obscure
put.
one?
I think I would. You would put Fallen Angels above Chungking Express.
Yes, to me, yes.
What
Well,
have
let's
we
save
done?
that. Let's table that for a second. So we're both going to put on.
What have we done?
Don't worry, guys.
We're
we'll
both
have
gonna
this
put
worked out
on-
in a second.
We'll both put on Better Tomorrow and The Killer, right?
Well, we could agree on the one that we could do is Well, actually, now that I feel like we're making this list, we should just both Better Tomorrow.
Yeah, we would agree on all of them.
So the Killer, Fallen Angels, Better Tomorrow. What about Jackie Chan? We got to put a Jackie Chan on, don't we?
Yeah,
Don't we have to
Project
put,
A. Project A. Project A.
Project A
Nope.
or Project A Part 2?
I know, but isn't that a little? Shouldn't it be Project A?
Well, no,
Rather-
Project A Type 2. Project A Part 2 has your like innocent victims of his cruelty bit.
Oh, yeah, that's like one line. But yeah, all right, fine. Project A Part 2. But I don't know about not putting Chungking Express. I don't know if I can. I love Fallen Angels, but Chungking Express that's like, one of the greatest movies ever made in my mind. What about a Choi Hart? What about like, I don't know,
I would say Peking
Opera Blues. Yeah, Peking Opera Blues.
All right. Well, this is for our 5.
Hang on. So that's
right now we have
Peking Opera Blues, A Better Tomorrow, Chungking Express, or Fallen Angels to be determined later, The Killer, and Project A Part 2. So that just leaves... Or wait, what about On the Run? Oh, shit.
Yeah, nobody knows what that movie is, though.
But that's one of the
I'm
great
getting a
It's
beer.
my favorite. No, wait. We're there. Well, you know what? We can put...
Don't we
I would
have to put On the Run? We could take off between Better Tomorrow and The Killer. I would go for... One of us should choose between Better Tomorrow and The Killer, and the other can choose between Chungking Express and Fallen Angels. How about that? So why don't you get The Killer and I'll get Chungking Express?
Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, that's a tough one. Better Tomorrow or The Killer? Jesus. I mean, The Killer has more pound for pound. The Killer is probably better. But Better Tomorrow was like the first Hong Kong movie we ever saw.
Yeah, but all right. I mean, all right. So then we're gonna go with The Killer and Chungking Express.
That's rough. Yeah, that's fine.
You can't get everything your way.
Yeah, all right. And then we're gonna put On the Run instead of Better Tomorrow, right?
Right. So
That's it.
Peking Opera Blues, Chungking Express, On the Run, and Project A Part 2. That's 5.
Okay.
Well, no,
right.
that's 4. And The Killer. The Killer.
Oh,
Chungking
wait,
Express,
right. And The Killer.
On the Run,
Sorry.
Peking Opera Blues, but all right.
And The
So
Killer.
okay, we'll just guys, because I know you guys got to go to bed. We'll just riff this in no particular order, and Ethan White, we'll just go between each other. You know what I mean? You
Okay.
start.
Yes.
Do
Okay.
it that way.
Okay, right. In that case,
And then, hey, Cy, when we're done doing 2 each, we should say the third one simultaneously. Why don't we do it that way?
Okay, that sounds confusing, but whatever.
It's not. Why is it confusing? It might be a challenge because we have to count like 1, 2, 3 or something. But I don't think it's confusing at all.
We'll try it. This might lie madness this way, but let's see. Let's try it. Yeah, let's go, baby. Fire up that music, Steve.